let's pivot to another topic in your Twitter timeline right now, and that is a couple of tweets from you a few days ago. Trump isn't the most pro-life president in history. Many conservative presidents have been pro-life their whole life, and Donald Trump was pro-choice not that long ago. Fair point.
Yeah.
I don't know if the longevity of his views diminishes the strength of them. Arriving at the truth late and then backing it strongly is a good and laudable thing. But just the one other tweet from you on that topic. You've made it clear before that you're pro-choice, or in your words, I've made it clear before that I'm pro-choice only because I believe the consequences of illegal abortions are so severe. Pro-lifers and I will have very different legal/moral points of view, but most of them are good people who believe they are defending humans' right to live. I like your position. Let's not say your position. I like your posture, and again, distinguishes you from a leftist because you're actually tolerant of other people's views. And I think it's, I also give people who have the opposite view to me, being pro-abortion, that they even do try to categorize it as pro-choice because there's this. Let me say this. Probably hostilely, there's this facile or shallow appreciation for choice, for liberty, and I do mean that critically and negatively because I think it fails to see beyond the first level that there's actually more than one person involved. But let's deal with your first tweet. First of all, that Donald Trump isn't the most pro-life president. Can you think of any other president who's done more for the sanctity of life subsequent to Roe v. Wade? To be fair, you can probably only compare with presidents in that last, 45 years, I think, since the Roe v. Wade decision.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. Obviously, it's incredibly hard to fight a Supreme Court decision, correct?
Yeah.
So that would be
even if it's a terrible, terrible, terrible legal, historical, constitutional decision.
Right. Well, that's kind of a separate point.
It was
essentially
it was a cheap shot.
Yeah. But essentially, listen, I think that there have been conservative presidents that have kind of that have given more power to the states and allowed them to impose restrictions that they see fit on abortion clinics and things that have basically drastically reduced the amount of abortion clinics that are available, and thus have reduced women's ability to get an abortion. So I would say that George W. Bush, for example, saw also a huge movement in terms of state rights to limit the number of abortions had. Mm-hmm. So right now, Donald Trump, to be fair, not that I'm defending his position, because as I've said, I'm not pro-life, but the issue is that he just hasn't done enough right now to say he is the most pro-life president in the world. Obviously, Mike Pence is going to go out there and say that because he kind of needs to, play to his ego, because Donald Trump is an egomaniac. I think even his fans would agree to that. That's my only point. I was saying that while Mike Pence was giving his speech, I was pointing it out. Yes, right now it seems that Donald Trump is pro-life. It seems that the policy that he's going to follow in the future will be that way. But to call him the most pro-life president that has ever lived
might have been a little bit premature, do you think?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. That's what I was getting at.
Yeah, sure. I'll take that.
And assuming that now we're going to move into the second point, which is where you're saying, well, how can you morally justify being pro-choice if you know that it is not a moral action, right?
Yep.
And this is something that obviously I have to fight with, because it's a constant struggle of both sides of my mind, one being the policy decision that I think just creates the least amount of harm in society, and the other being that I know that abortion is essentially ending a human life, and that there is nothing moral about that. So the only thing that I will say is that I've seen statistics that have been that some people try to refute but aren't very concrete, that whenever people's ability to get an abortion is reduced, we see a higher number of illegal abortions, abortions that are tried to be induced medically that have horrible consequences for the mother. Also, illegal kind of what they call alleyway abortions, or what do they call it? The ones that are done with hooks and back alleys. Those are obviously extremely
Coat
dangerous.
hanger.
Yeah, coat hanger. That's what I was looking for.
Mm.
And obviously, I think that that's extremely dangerous. So the point of view that I'm trying to take is that at this moment, just because there is such a tremendous lack of culture when it comes to the practice of safe sex, and right now there's obviously a hookup culture and all these things that have made unwanted pregnancies just go completely out of control. There's also a lack of knowledge of birth control and contraceptives that allow women to basically be their own sovereign person and conduct themselves sexually however they want.
Yep.
But then end up obviously suffering consequences. And for me right now, there is just no better alternative socially than to allow these people to get an abortion, because then there's just all of these. You have all the issues with unwanted pregnancies having to take them to term. You have women not taking care of themselves, not taking the proper vitamins, not consuming not consuming alcohol, smoking, all these things that have terrible outcomes for the baby. And it just seems like right now the unintended consequences of illegal abortion are far outweigh the opposite end. However, I think that if we could start moving towards teaching, first of all, that there is a morality and there are strong consequences to having a pregnancy that you have to terminate, that it's not a casual thing, as so many people try to frame it. Because some people are like, oh, if you get pregnant, no big deal, get an abortion. No, I mean, it's a horrible thing. Don't try to, I'm not saying that necessarily the women are taking on an incredibly immoral stance, because ultimately maybe that's the only decision they had at the moment. But let's not pretend that it's just something casual that you do and then you move on with your life. Many women, the consequences emotionally of that for many years. And let's also teach people how to copulate responsibly. I think that also has to do with ending sort of this whole thing of you're an empowered woman if you hook up a lot, which is bullshit. You're essentially giving, you're basically kind of less of a feminist because you're just giving the men everything they want and kind of like sacrificing your own sexual activity as a sexual pernicity as a woman. So that's another thing that we have to work on. So that's the way forward, I think. I want to see. It's
actually an exceptionally good plan to end up with an unwanted pregnancy.
Exactly.
It's not knowing the height of stupidity. Yeah,
exactly. So you have a bunch of irresponsible sex with a bunch of random strangers, and don't get educated, and then
the problems I have with your argument, and again, I like your posture and the good that you're seeking to have as the best outcome, but I don't think there's a worse outcome possible than in America alone, and a tenth of this in Australia, but in America alone, it's 1 million babies per year that are killed deliberately. I don't think there is a worse outcome than that. You even take the demographic breakup of those 1 million babies alone and compare it to the demographic makeup of America itself and the populations anywhere, and it's genocidal. It's always minorities that are disproportionately represented, and grossly so. It was the intent of the founder of Planned Parenthood, Margaret Sanger, to facilitate and support a eugenics agenda by promoting abortion, especially in minority communities in America. She was a huge fan of Hitler. As you rightly identify, abortion is steeped in ethical problems and gross immorality. But what is the worst outcome than 1 million babies in America and 100,000 in Australia being deliberately killed by their mothers every year? It's a horrible comment on society, and I think it's the most obvious, most numerically damaging moral issue that we have in the world today. It's not climate change, the moral humanitarian crisis. It's the wholesale slaughter of our unborn children under the names of healthcare and reproductive rights. This sovereignty, this body sovereignty argument neglects the question whose body ends up in the bucket. And if you've seen the video released, recently, I think it's by Live Action. They're showing people who are pro-abortion choice on the street videos of what an abortion procedure involves, and they all change their mind. There's this gross lack of information, and information is power and empowerment, and so it's a transparent lie that feminism and Planned Parenthood and abortion is all about empowering women, when most of them don't even know what's involved in the procedures. Even in the first trimester, when they see the videos of an abortion, they go, oh, well, I'm not sure I'm pro-choice anymore. In fact, I find it very hard to support that. That's not right. You can't do that. Your thoughts on...
So yeah. I mean, there's obviously, there have been tremendous medical advancements in how abortions are made. And so in the first trimester, they're actually pretty safe and pretty non-invasive. Most of them are even medical. But that's really not the point. That's beside the point, because yes, obviously a lot of, especially when the fetus is more developed, the process is far less palatable. Let's say it that way.
But what these videos reveal is that people underestimate how developed the fetus is in the first trimester, when abortions are most often happening.
Right, but that shouldn't even play a point. That shouldn't even really play that much of a role. I mean, just because it looks more like a human, less like a human. I mean, the ultimate, what that ultimately will become is a human. So what does it matter if it's a little round thing or a little tiny baby?
Hang on, let me stop you with that language. Maybe it was accidental, maybe it was deliberate. It won't become a human. It's no other species. It's a human from conception.
It will become a self-thinking human that will contribute to society. Let's put it that way. That's kind of what I tried to say. Maybe my wording was off. But essentially, I'm
sorry to interrupt you. Like those other qualifiers that you used, the lack of those, aren't necessarily devaluing the infant either. Sentient and contributing. They're not reasons to abort a person, are they?
Exactly. No. Like what you're saying is essentially people that have disabilities that doesn't allow.
Yeah.
Listen, Dave. Right now we're getting into a discussion that maybe need not be had, because I agree with you on all these things. That's my point. I'm not saying that I disagree with you morally. Obviously, the conservative pro-life argument intellectually always will take home the gold. Okay, because this is a human life that's being ended. I'm not going to pretend, I'm not going to cover my eyes and pretend that this is a point of view that doesn't create incredible internal conflict with me. I'm not happy about my choice. I wouldn't want to go too far to one side just because it would be more comfortable for me. I have come to the decision that I've come to and to the opinion that I've come to because I have seen the data that is presented to me, and I have just reached a point that I think logically makes the most sense, regardless of the fact that I don't agree morally with this. And I think that there are several things that we
So you're talking about the harm to women if they self-abort, if they do a coat hanger back alley illegal, other thing like that?
Yes, and not only that. I mean, also you have
Can I test your logic on that?
Yeah, sure.
If a woman wanted to kill her 2-year-old child and regulating that provided better safety to the woman as opposed to the risks she may face by killing her child by herself if the child was 2 years old, would you try and say that legalizing and regulating and safely administrating the murder of a toddler was justifiable by avoiding the harm to the woman?
Right. No, absolutely not. Of course not. Obviously, I think that you can obviously put a child, a toddler into the system where into the foster system where you can't really do the foster system for a fetus. And again, the thing is that right now you're going to throw several ethical quandaries at me, and obviously ethically the argument for abortion will never win. Ethically, it will never win. I mean, and so we can go back and forth on this for hours, and the moral arguments for abortion will always lose. Always. Yep. The issue is that the societal impact to me is obvious. And even though what we're saying about a child that is maybe 2 years old versus 2 months old is still a human, frankly, the societal impact that I see from having to carry unwanted pregnancies to term, or from women trying to self-abort, or women trying to get illegal abortions, just are far too far-reaching and terrifying for me to support complete blanket illegalization. So rather than try to pick apart my very, very complex moral decision for being pro-choice rather than pro-life, I would say the issue is that both points of view exist, okay? And it's almost going to be impossible to get someone that's on this side to agree with someone that's on this side. So how in the world are we going to fix this? It's almost an unwinnable fight because it brings up so much vitriol and so much emotion to talk about this that it's almost impossible to reach a middle ground.
And it needs to. We need to be both dispassionate and coldly logical about right and wrong. Hard cases make bad laws, so but at the same time, there's something wrong with us if we're not emotional and upset by the genocide of 1 million unborn children every year. It shouldn't be surprising or a criticism if somebody's emotional about it.
No. People kind of try to paint pro-lifers as ignorant buffoons that are just yelling nonsense, but no, they couldn't be further from the truth.
The problem I have with your logic is that it seems inconsistently applied based on the location of the child, and I think the dispassionate logical approach needs to be, well, hang on, I disagree, and I think this is just subjective, but because plenty of people will disagree with me. I think the worst outcome is death, not suffering. Okay. And there's plenty of people who will take the opposite for that. I also think you're underestimating statistically, and I understand why, because it's such a PC topic that the research and data is suppressed and certainly not widely published in the mainstream media. But the data and the statistics on the harm to women from abortion is, look, my understanding, and perhaps we should compare sources and compare research, but it's far greater for, 1 in 3 women over the age of 40 in the Western world has had an abortion, and most of them are the walking wounded with silent, invisible wounds that they're not allowed to even acknowledge. The rates of PTSD, I mean, I know of people, women in their 70s, who are getting counseling for the grief and the trauma and the emotional psychological wounds they have carried for decades, unacknowledged and unresolved as a result of killing their children. And my sympathy is for those women. I don't condemn those women. I think they are victims of abortion. If I hate anything, it's abortion. I don't even hate abortionists, the people doing this killing. I think if we're going to talk about good laws, I think women should never be prosecuted for having an abortion, but abortionists should definitely be prosecuted. The same as I think.
With you, by the way.
Yeah, well, he's right when he agrees with me. Sorry, I thought ego was the way to be Donald Trump. But so, it's just like any other murder in my books. Anybody that facilitates a murder should be culpable for it. I definitely see women as the victims here. And that's the point I'm making, is that if your goal and your argument is for the greater good, for the least harm, then my assertion is the best way to minimize harm and maximize social good is to make abortion socially repugnant, illegal to provide. Now, for those people who are watching, direct abortion is never medically necessary. There's a thing that you can look up and Google. It's called the Dublin Declaration, where over 1,000 obstetricians, gynecologists, midwives, and other associated professionals who are charged with the care of women have agreed and signed this declaration that they are always for saving a woman's life, and direct abortion has never been necessary to save a woman's life. And here's the difference, is that delivering a child prematurely necessarily, even if the odds of survival are really, really low, to save a mother's life, isn't an abortion. There's, medical intervention and cesarean delivery, and it's even evident by the language that you choose. We're gonna have to deliver the baby. We're gonna have to take the baby out. But abortion basically says our intention is to end this child's life,
Right.
and that's unconscionable. So have a look at the Dublin Declaration if you've never seen that before. It will blow your mind compared to the narrative.
Yeah, listen, I haven't seen a lot of the things that you've cited, but I have done my research, and again, we agree, I think, in more points than this conversation would.
But it's boring to agree. Let's focus on the disagreements.
Yeah, let's focus on the disagreements. Essentially, yeah. I mean, that's always a good point. But right now, the thing that I will say is that I believe that when properly implemented, there are better ways to curb abortion rates that will appease both sides. It won't appease both sides completely. And I think that pro-life advocates have every right to continue to chip away at people's right to get an abortion, just the same way that pro-lifers will always continue to intend to expand people's possibility. But if we can start doing something that is fighting the root cause rather than fighting the method, then we're going to get some real results.
Well, I think we can walk and chew gum at the same time. I think we should overturn bad laws, but not at the neglect of implementing better culture, better value of life, better value of women's health. I think you're absolutely right. There has been perhaps a dominance of focus on the baby alone and not the woman for a few decades. But in recent years, the argument has been better articulated. And I think the concern was always there, but it just wasn't part of the rhetoric of the pro-life campaign that, hey, abortion kills a baby and hurts a woman every time. Every time. Quite often... you're absolutely right. We have to focus on, look, how can we help women who must be empathized with in difficult situations? One of the things that has to be entered into the conversation and the dialogue is, if you're a feminist, how can you not acknowledge that abortion is used as a weapon of domestic violence frequently, where women who are just so afraid for their relationship feel obliged and compelled, and are obliged and compelled by their boyfriend, de facto husband, male partner, to go and have an abortion, or else he's going to leave her, or else he's going to, induce it himself with violence. There's parents, it might be through cultural shame or through, other things that force women to have it. There's heaps of women who've had an abortion who didn't want it and were forced to by the people they thought loved them. I mean, the welfare of women has to be one of these conversations that we're having about why there needs to be more information about abortion. And again, I agree with you. Perhaps that fixing the legislation certainly isn't the only strategy we should be doing. We should be providing more information. In fact, I refuse to call the pro-choice campaign pro-choice anymore, because it's actually better characterized as pro-abortion choice. What we need to be doing is saying, hey, let's talk about all the other choices that are available as well. You can have pre-birth adoption, where you actually have the ability to choose the parents that will love and raise your child, and they get to be involved in supporting you through your pregnancy. So if you can't afford the prenatal care, the vitamins and those things, then you get are we talking about these other choices very often? Very often. Absolutely. This is Dave, what I think the more productive conversation generally is. I agree. It's about to get boring.
It's so much. No, because the other one will always be a back and forth where no one will ever be satisfied. When we start to talk about solutions, that's when it can get a lot better. So, for example, in Australia, obviously there are a lot more safety nets than in the United States, right? And so a woman
in places.
In places. Probably some places are a little bit more nanny state than the others. Yeah. But in some places, a woman who doesn't really have a lot of money will probably say, because of the safety net that is provided to her, that she may be able to have this child without it ruining her economically for the rest of her life.
Mm.
So, for example, she won't have to choose between taking care of the child and going to college, because the government ultimately pay for your college, and then you have to pay it back once you're making a certain amount of money. There's also access to childcare, all these different things, which make it far more viable for you to say, you know what, I have this child, maybe it's not what I wanted at some point, but it's alive and I need to take care of it. And if it's my choice to be the one that takes care of it, or her or him, rather, then it's better to have certain things in place that will allow me to do this while not having this be the only thing that will happen in my life for the rest of my life. That is a much better solution than to say, well, let's talk about morality for hours, because where are we going to get with that? Let's talk about what we can do to help women actually be able to keep their babies, or maybe not keep them, but have them stay alive and go on and live their life.
That's right. Yeah, look, pro-choice has to be pro-real choice, not pro-abortion choice. And you can't have a real choice if you're operating under lack of information or misinformation. One of the worst things about the abortion industry, and it is a profitable industry of death, is that they perpetuate this myth that you can become unpregnant by having an abortion.
And it never happened.
You don't have reproductive rights once you're pregnant. You have exercised your reproductive right. You had sex.
Exactly.
That was you exercising your reproductive right. What you're wanting now, or what they're arguing for now, is a destructive right. And there is a life, there is a human, and it is alive. And to change that, you have to be destructive. And the hormones won't stop, and the emotions won't stop. You don't become magically unpregnant when you have an abortion. You have to deal with all of these things. And if you're not given this information and this reality, you can't make a real choice about the many options that are available to you. And so even just changing the culture and the information and the public education around, abortion counseling, pregnancy counseling places need funding. The only places that are attracting funding at the moment is the abortion procedure with a Medicare rebate. And, whether you have a miscarriage or an abortion, it's the same Medicare number. So the numbers are probably conservative of abortions in Australia. But when you have an abortion, it's mandatory that you have counselling. Guess who has to provide the counselling? The abortion provider. Guess how much funding there is for the counselling? None. Guess how much funding they get if their counselling doesn't result in an abortion? None. There is no incentive. It's a gross conflict of interest to have counselling about this procedure, which is in the criminal code in some states, rightly so, because it should be highly, highly regulated to protect women. There's this huge conflict of interest about this significant thing that's far more important and impactful than having a mole removed. It's like getting business coaching from an insolvency provider. They have no profit until you make the only decision that they make profit from. So we need to have funding and support for the pregnancy counselling places who will provide support for women, who will provide them with other choices and other options. And there's this huge statistic of and I won't pick a number because I don't remember it exactly, but it's a large number of women, if not a majority, who wouldn't have gone ahead with their abortion if they had have felt there was another option, another choice, and any other kind of support. So your point is made well, and we agree furiously that that there needs to be a lot more effort put into the other choices that are available.
Absolutely. And that, I promise you, is something that most pro-lifers and pro-choicers will be able to agree with.
Yeah.
You have disagreements on the legislation and on the morality, but something that I think there are very few people of will say, no, I don't want there to be any other alternative. I don't want to have a mom have the ability to keep her child. I only want abortion. I don't.
Yeah, that's right.
This is how we move forward.
Yeah. Oh, there's so much more information I can talk about that. I'm deeply passionate, as you can tell, about
of course,
about women's health and I think the evil of the profitable abortion industry. Even just knowing that most pregnancy counselling places run off volunteers and fundraising as opposed to government funding it gives you a big clue about the ethics and the agenda
Right.
behind each perspective. But I have indulged myself of your time for just about an hour now. So
Right.
thank you very much. Tell all the viewers who've enjoyed this conversation and prefer perhaps a view that's slightly less passionately conservative than mine, where they can catch Emilio Garcia Cruz and the Front and Center podcast.
Absolutely. You can get the Front and Center podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also get all of my content on frontandcenter.net.au. Subscribe. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm always on the Unshackled website as well and the Unshackled Facebook. So please keep tuning in.
Fantastic. Emilio Garcia Cruz. Do we say your whole name, or is it just Emilio Cruz, or is it the two
Emilio
dads?
Garcia, Emilio Cruz. You can call me absolutely whatever, as long as it's not cuck or Nazi. I'm happy.
I won't call you cuck or Nazi. Emilio, it's been great having you on, and look forward to talking to you again soon.
Absolutely. Have a nice day.